Welcome to Unschooling Conversations. Today I am joined by Naomi Fisher, and in this episode we are going to discuss her recently published book, Changing Our Minds, How Children Can Take Control of Their Own Learning. I'm Heidi Steele, former teacher and unschooling parent to 4 school-aged children who are happy living and learning as they go. I've been unschooling for almost 10 years and I blog regularly and organise coaching courses and mentoring services on unschooling, which you can find more about at liveplaylearn.org. I'm also inviting people to get involved with future episodes of the podcast by asking questions, which you can send in by audio or in the comments section, depending on what platform you are listening to this on. And those will hopefully shape further conversations that we have here. Now, Naomi and I have known each other for a few years now, and we met as unschooling parents. Our children still enjoy each other's company and play regularly together. And we also host a live monthly webinar called Exploring Self-Directed Education, where we discuss different topics, and participants are able to ask us questions as part of the conversation during the live webinar. Tickets for those are available via Eventbrite. So Naomi, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Heidi.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, so I'm Naomi, and as Heidi said, she and I met in unschooling camp actually a long time ago. Well, it seems like a long time ago now. And I am a clinical psychologist, and I unschooled my children for the first 6 years of their compulsory education. We then took the slightly unusual step of moving to France, where they went to a self-directed school for 2 years. We then moved back in May 2020, and they are now at the Self-Managed Learning College in Portslade or Hove near Brighton. So we have taken a slightly different path to Heidi, but we have stuck with self-directed education, but we haven't just done it at home. We've done it within self-directed schools or self-managed learning colleges as well. And because I'm a psychologist, one of the reasons that they actually went to self-directed school was because I wanted to work. And part of my interest in psychology has always been working with families and children who aren't that happy at school. And so I have a kind of dual interest in my own children and their education, but also in thinking about how things could be better for lots of children who I meet who aren't very happy with how things are. And those children often are those who attract diagnoses of ADHD or autism or other neurodiverse conditions. And I've just written a book. So when the children actually went to self-directed school for the first time, I thought, wow, I've got all this time. So I thought, I really wanted to write down my thoughts, because I felt like for 6 years I'd been thinking about self-directed education, but I'd never had a moment to actually write anything down or think about it in any kind of concerted way, focused way, concentrated way, because I had my children with me all the time. So I actually started writing when we were in France, and I just started writing because I've always been really interested in how theory, particularly psychology, I think that a lot of what we know about child psychology fits brilliantly with self-directed education. I think if we apply a lot of very mainstream theories about child psychology, then what we get is self-directed education. But obviously most people don't see it that way. So I was a bit on a mission to write a book which explained how I thought psychology actually informs self-directed education, how there's a lot of research that shows that a lot of the things we do in self-directed education are what works for children, because I see that working, and I've seen it working with my own children the whole time. And I think is that enough?
Reminds me of the point Peter Gray mentions actually in his foreword, which is that schools are actually not built on any sort of research or evidence about how children learn. That was not their initial purpose, and they have continued to just follow the same format for decades and decades, in fact, centuries.
Exactly.
And it's not based on any research.
No, there's no, exactly. It's just how we do things and how we've always done things. And one of the things I talk about in my book, and that's why I've called my book Changing Our Minds, is because almost all of us parents were schooled. We almost all went to school. And the process of schooling isn't just one of acquiring skills in reading and maths and whatever else one might do in order to get your GCSEs. It's also a process of being taught how important school is. And we start that with children really early on. Before they go to school, we start giving them books about how great school is. Or we have these little stories about this poor nervous animal that was going to school for the very first time, and there they met their lovely kind teacher and made friends and lived happily ever after and discovered that they really did have to go to school to learn. So we teach our children really, really early on that if they don't go to school, they won't learn. School's the best place to be. And as psychologists, one of the ways we think about whether a child is managing in the world is, are they going to school or not? So a child who isn't going to school immediately triggers, for many psychologists, worry. Okay, this child isn't functioning. They should, that's how we think of a well-rounded child. Are they at school? Are they adjusted to school? But the problem with that is, what if school is actually quite a dysfunctional environment? What if it's not a great environment to be in? Then what does it mean to be well adjusted to school? And I think one of the things that I would say is that perhaps being badly adjusted, in quotes, to school actually is a sign of a very strong-willed child, or a child who is showing the rest of us that actually there are problems here. And I know from myself, for example, that my children are far better at picking up control, for example, in the environment than I was. I went to school, I did very well at school, I complied with school, I got my GCSEs, I went and did the International Baccalaureate, I went to university, ticked all the boxes at school, mostly. I do talk about times that I didn't do that in my book, but mostly I did comply with school. And I didn't even notice how I was being molded. I didn't even notice that I was picking up all these things. Like, for example, the way that we compete at school is all about competition. Learning is always about who's better than everybody else. There's very little that's actually just learning for its own sake. And there's fascinating research which shows that if you tell people that their learning is going to be evaluated, so if you have a group of kids and you say, right, we're going to learn about whatever it is, World War II, and at the end, I'm going to test you. Then immediately, they're going to choose to do the easiest thing they can do. So the focus has shifted from what am I going to learn, what might be interesting here, to you're going to test me. Gosh, I better find something easy. And I know that from myself. I mean, one of the things I write about in my book was I several times chose the easy subjects for myself when I went up through school. Like for my GCSEs, I chose music. I didn't really want to do music. I didn't think it was very interesting. The teacher wasn't very interesting. And I was pretty sure I probably knew everything in the music syllabus already because I played several musical instruments. I knew I'd passed my grade 5 theory exam, but I knew I could get an A in music. If I'd gone and done art, which I would have liked to do, I might have got a B or a C because I wasn't actually very good at art. So the result is I got my A in music and I'm still not very good at art. And I never got any further with art. In fact, my daughter was telling me just today, we were doing some colouring in together. And she said, Naomi, I think the problem with you and art is you just don't stick at it. She said, you just think you're not very good and you just stop. I was like, yes, you're right. That's exactly what I do with art. I just kind of decided that I wasn't going to be very good at art. And so I stopped. And I think that's another thing I learned at school, that we only do things that we're good at. And actually, why should we just do things that we're good at? If I enjoy drawing and art and making things, why can't I just do that? And why couldn't I encourage my children just to do that, regardless of whether they're ever going to be Picasso or not? That really doesn't matter. For most of us, life is not about being the best at whatever we do, but at school, we're taught it is.
Yeah, and there's that element as well. There are some subjects at school hold more value than others. So things like art are not
valued.
Yeah, so things like art, there's sort of a pecking order of subjects.
Definitely.
Art are not seen as...
They're not hard subjects, are they?
Yeah. And they're not as important.
Yeah.
So and that was something that I felt when I was in school, and I can probably only say that now reflecting on it.
Yeah.
And a lot of the stories that you put in your book as well really resonated with me. Like I know that I chose to do subjects that I knew the answers to.
Yes, exactly.
Not the things that particularly maybe even challenged me, or that I wanted to find out more about.
No.
And for myself, but just the things that I knew, well, I can do that, so I'm going to choose that subject. Or particularly, you know, I used to learn information for the test, and I wouldn't learn any more information than was required.
Of course not. Why would you? The system is set up so that you wouldn't want to do that, isn't it? The system is set up so that you think the end is the point of it all is the test. And you know that I can remember being in classes and the teacher would start talking about something and immediately someone would stick their hand up and say, is this going to be on the test? And if it's not, basically it's like, okay, we switch off. Yeah. So you've put children into this particular mode where everything is about, am I going to be tested on this? And it's interesting you say about the hierarchy of subjects, because that's also something that really resonates with me, because when I was in sixth form, I actually went and chose to do physics, chemistry, and advanced maths. And really, those weren't where my heart was in terms of subjects. But I knew that they were the high status subjects. They were the subjects that most people would say, oh, I couldn't do that. I couldn't do physics. I couldn't do advanced maths. That would be far too difficult. And it was almost entirely male people in the classes as well. It was very rare to be a girl doing those. And so I sort of felt that if I could do those, I should do them. And it didn't really matter that actually I didn't really like physics. I actually would probably have far preferred to be doing history or economics, but they were lower down the pecking order in terms of subjects. And so I did those, I did those subjects. And to be honest, I'm not quite sure how I managed to scrape through, because I really wasn't very interested. And then I ended up going to university to do a degree that I really wasn't very interested in as well, because that was the kind of pipeline I was on. And I was lucky because I actually went to university to do medicine, which similarly is a degree that one has very high status. You know, even within a university, if you're a medic, that has a kind of aura about it. And I definitely learned through school that status was really important. Being seen to be clever was really important. And one way to do that was choosing the difficult subjects. So I went and did medicine, and I really didn't like it. I really found it just did not chime with me at all. I found it really difficult to memorize all the names of nerves and bones and everything. I didn't like it. And then I thought, do I really want to spend all my days seeing people who are ill and giving them drugs for that? And luckily for me, I was at a university where everybody did an intercalated third year in a different subject. And it was amazing. Literally, you could do it in any subject, which was really, actually, if you think about it, it's quite nice and self-directed. I had a friend who did Chinese, somebody did engineering, and I did psychology. And that was it. I did this year of psychology and I was like, I'm not going back to medicine. And that was a big lesson for me, because actually quitting something like medicine at that stage is quite hard. People can't really believe that you would want to do that, because there is this feeling of you're on the gravy train, basically. You're going to have a career, you know which job you're going to get, you're going to be a doctor. And I was like, no, I'm not going to be a doctor. I'm going to go off and do a PhD in psychology instead. And there was a lot, I had to brazen it out, but I think it was good. It was sort of started my, actually, maybe this isn't quite what I want. You know, I've put myself on this conveyor belt, but actually maybe that's not where I want to be.
In your book, you talk about things like intrinsic motivation, yes. Meaningful learning, autonomy.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate a little bit on those things? Because I don't think those are things that we affiliate with school. They are definitely things that are part of self-directed education.
Yes.
So could you elaborate on those?
So this is the idea that motivation exists on a spectrum. That at one end we've got intrinsic motivation, which is when you're doing something because you love it, because you really want to be doing it. And then we've got a whole spectrum, and right at the other end we've got purely external motivation. That's when you're doing something because you've been forced to do it. And the thing is that we often think of external motivation as punishments. So we think you're doing something because you think you'll be punished otherwise, but actually rewards work in the same way. So if, for example, you're only learning something because you want to get your A in your GCSE, that's an external motivation. You're learning it for the external motivator. And there is a spectrum in the middle. So it's not that there's just intrinsic motivation. There's not just the two. In the middle, it kind of gets more and more and more external. So I can't remember exactly what they are, but it's all in my book. But this is based on self-determination theory, which is by two psychologists, Richard Ryan and Edward Detchi, and they've written books about it. It's really interesting stuff. I'd recommend having a look. But basically, the more that you move towards the external motivation, the lower the quality of your learning will be. Because you're learning because somebody else is making you do it. You're not learning because you really love it. And a lot of what goes on at school is about creating this environment of external motivation. So right from the start, children are told, you're here because, if you work hard, you'll get good jobs. They really are told that quite early on. And, you need to behave yourself here because you need to learn, and you have to learn to read, and you have to learn to this. And the reason you need to do that is so you'll do well later on. So everything is not about what you really want to do anymore. It's about what you're being made to do. And I think that's something that really quite important that happens at school early on in children's development, that they learn that what they want to do is less important than what somebody else wants them to do. So they're all the time effectively squashing their own desires about what they want to do, because they're being told, no, it's not time to play now. It's time to come and do your phonics group. Or no, we're not allowed to, we can't go outside and stamp in the puddles now. You've got to come and do your maths. And as they go up, a reception that's quite gentle, and then in year one it gets more rigid, and it goes up and up and up until you're spending more and more of your time sitting at your desk and less of your time doing what you might want to do. And in fact, doing what you might want to do gets limited to very short periods like playtime. The rest of the time, your time is controlled and you're doing what somebody else wants you to do. Now, I think it's really unsurprising that the output of this system is teenagers who often don't have a clue what they want to do, because we've spent their entire growing up period saying what you want to do isn't important. We want you to be doing something else. And then suddenly we get to GCSEs and we say, okay, what are you interested in? And I remember the feeling at GCSEs, like, I have no clue what I'm interested in. What I'm interested in is when there's an entertaining teacher. That's basically it. Doesn't matter what the subject is, because if the teacher's nice and not too, gives us interesting things to do, that's okay. If they're not, doesn't matter. And then I think you get the same problem that I had, which is when I went on to choose sixth form subjects, which weren't really what I was interested in. And then I went on to do a degree that I wasn't really interested in, because very early on I'd been taught that what I was really interested in wasn't important. So I think self-directed education turns that completely around, and it says, what are you interested in? And that's where we're going to start. Doesn't matter what it is. No one's going to say, oh, well, that's not a proper thing to be interested in. What you're really, really interested in is watching surprising videos on YouTube, then that's what we can do. And we can expand that. I don't know if we did surprise eggs with you, Heidi, but certainly with my children, when we went through our surprise egg video stage, we got our own Play-Doh, we made our own surprise eggs. We had these plastic eggs from Poundland or something. Did you?
That's what I was going to say. We went to Poundland and bought
bags of these plastic.
Put little things inside them. We didn't have to have, it could be our own toys. We didn't have to buy new toys to put inside them, but we put them in, and then we opened up the surprise eggs. And you can expand any interest. If your attitude is, great, that's what you're interested in, how can I help you find out more about that? How can I help you explore that? And that, I think, is the really subversive bit of self-directed education, because what we're helping children do is right from the start, we're helping them listen to themselves and their interests. And the hope that we have is that as they grow, they won't lose touch with that, because small children are really good at knowing what they want to do. That's what it means. The terrible twos, the terrible threes means that they're learning, this is what I want to do, and no, I'm not going to do what you want to do. But we send them off to school, which is all about, you're going to do what I want to do, from the teacher's point of view, and it's not about what you want to do anymore. And that's understandable, because if you have 30 children in a class, 34 or 5-year-olds, you had 34 or 5-year-olds, the mind boggles. I can see completely why you can't say, that's fine, you do exactly what you want. But at home or in a self-directed school, we don't have that problem. We don't have to control the children in the same way. And by not doing that, I think we can nurture something really precious, because we can mean that they don't lose touch with why they do something and what really makes them happy. And that doesn't mean that they'll still be wanting to splash in muddy puddles. Often parents will say, but what if they never move on? What if they're going to always just want to play with Lego? That's it. We're never going to do anything else. That isn't what happens. Children grow up, they develop, their interests change, their interests become more sophisticated in ways that we would never have imagined. And we don't, as schooled parents, we don't know that, because we were told that happens because of school. You know, we're taught that children only learn to read because school teaches them, that children only learn to pay attention because school makes them do that. That isn't the case from what I see in my children and the other children around them. Children grow up and their thinking becomes more sophisticated. They suddenly become able to concentrate on things in a different way. They suddenly learn to acquire new skills. They choose to do difficult things all the time. My daughter at the moment is choosing to sew all the time. Would not have been something I would have expected her to do. She just picked up lots of felt and threads and started sewing little Among Us characters. It's quite hard work. It takes her weeks. And, you know, she's doing it. It's entirely intrinsically motivated. She's doing it because she loves doing it. And I can see her getting better and better at sewing just because she's doing what she loves. And I think John Holt talks about this, the difference between doing what you love and improving in things and learning through that, and being made to practice doing something in order that you should learn something that someone else thinks you should do. And go on.
I can't remember exactly what you said, but they won't always be interested in Lego. But my 13-year-old is still interested in Lego. But
Lego is pretty amazing stuff.
And it has been a passion of his since he could have Duplo bricks.
Yeah.
But the difference is now he's 13, it's more sophisticated.
Yeah.
You know, he now completes models that take him, 10 to 12 hours of, intense
amazing
concentration. And if he misses a step or gets a step wrong, he's got the skills to then be able to retrace his steps and find out what it was, or to try it out. And it's a completely different experience to when he was younger playing with Lego. But it has led to, us joining social groups, going and seeing Lego exhibitions at different museums. He used to have Lego magazines, which is one of the ways that he learned to began to learn to read. That opened up a lot of other avenues for us, but still continues to be.
So you've got that thread running through of his interest in Lego. Yes, I was thinking as I said it that Lego is actually a bad example, because it becomes much more sophisticated, and there are adults who love spending their time doing Lego.
My husband has a collection.
Oh, there you are, you've got Lego running in the family.
Everywhere.
But the difference is it's not the same as the child playing with Duplo. And I think that's what people often seem, I think as our kind of schooled thinking is that it's schooling that makes the child the adult. And that if we don't school, the children will somehow be stuck at preschool level forever, that they won't move on from that stage. Like, people often say things like, will they just follow every whim? Do we just, or I read an article in the Times, I think the Times Educational Supplement, something about some psychologists saying, you can't leave children to discover everything, because that, the discovery stage is just not enough. Basically, they have to have structure, and what they mean is imposed structure by an adult. They mean compulsory structure. When I read it, I was like, wow, this is really interesting, because I think that's something that I'll talk a little bit about that, actually, if you don't mind, the discovery mastery thing, because I think that's something that people, and I know I felt nervous about myself as a parent initially, that you see a young child are in the discovery phase of learning. And this is Alison Gopnik who talks about these two stages of learning. The discovery phase of learning is when everything is about exploration, really. There's not much focus on improving skills, although that's not always the case, because some children do focus very intently on improving particular skills. Obviously, they're not focusing on improving skills, in quotes, they're doing what they love doing and they're just getting better at it as they do it. But basically they are exploring things. They're trying things out. They're saying, do I like doing that? Do I not like doing that? And they haven't got a huge amount of sticking power. So interest come and go, and they may never come back again. Then at a particular age, and Gopnik says it's age 7, I think that's about schooling and about children being made to do that when they're age 7, because I think in unschooled and self-directed children, it's about age 9 and 10. And around that age, they suddenly seem to click in and start thinking, wow, I could get better at this if I wanted to. And there's an intentionality which comes in, which I think often isn't there earlier on. So a child might draw lots and get good at drawing, but they're not thinking, I want to get good at drawing, so I'm going to do this. Whereas I think when they get to about 9 or 10, what I saw with my son was he really wanted to learn to ride his bicycle. And he just got on that bike and fell off it for about 5 afternoons in a row. And, you know, he had to wear, I remember him coming to the house and saying, right, I need long sleeves, I need long shirts, because he was falling off the bicycle all the time. And, you know, he has some difficulties with coordination. And I had privately thought he might not manage to learn how to ride a bicycle because he did have a lot of trouble coordinating it. And he was 9 and most other children had learned to ride a bicycle by this point. He just went for it. Get on it, fall off, get on it, fall off, get on it, fall off, get on it, fall off. And he learned how to ride his bicycle, and he can now ride a bicycle fine. And I thought, wow, there's something really different, because I don't think he could have done that a year ago. He couldn't have applied himself in the same way. And I know you've talked about your son applying himself to Dungeons and Dragons in a similar way.
He's has a notebook which he sits with and doodles in all the time. But he found some videos on YouTube which were instructional videos on how to draw people.
Oh yeah.
And he started drawing them, and he was really pleased with them, and he showed them to me. And as it happens, his paternal grandparents are artists.
Mm-hmm.
So I remembered and said, oh, actually, we've got one of those little models.
Oh yeah.
Shows you all the joints and the arms,
Yeah.
which is how this tutorial had shown him how to do it.
Yeah.
We couldn't actually find it, but it just reminded me, and we bought one for him. But he's much more intentional about, actually, this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to achieve, you know, this drawing, and this is how I want it to look, and this is how I'm going to, you know, I'm going to look on YouTube, and I'm going to find a tutorial for myself.
Yeah.
Then I'm, you know, and now he's got this little model, so he's already started putting it in, you know, poses and having a go. He's much more intentional about what he's trying to achieve and how he's going to do it.
Exactly. And when you see that happening, I think that's really exciting, because if a child has that understanding of how they can make things happen and how they can learn things, then basically they can learn anything. Mm-hmm. So I thought that with my son, once he'd learned how to ride his bicycle, it kind of felt like you can just apply that to whatever else you might want to learn. And what I see with school children is that we try to make them do that much earlier than they're ready to do it. So we say to very young children, I don't mean we, but schools say to very young children, you need to concentrate, you need to focus, you need to apply yourself, you need to practice. And by doing that, they actually remove from children the chance to learn how to do it themselves, because it becomes something that's imposed upon them by others. And I think so that's Gopnik talks about that being the mastery phase of learning. So we've got discovery phase, which is the younger children, and then moving to mastery, which is when you're practicing so that you can master things. And once you've learned how to master skills, it doesn't really matter what you're learning, because you can apply it to anything you need to learn.
Schools have a habit of saying this is how somebody learns successfully. So, you know, you gave some examples of, you know, you need to sit, you need to concentrate, your workspace needs to look, you know, just in this format. And one of the things you talk about in your book is, in fact, you've got a chapter called Being Ourselves.
Oh yeah.
And actually those things might apply to some children, and that might be the way that some children choose to learn, or how their learning flourishes. But it's not applicable to all children. And it's so my observation with my own children and families that we have contact with is that children who are free to sort of be themselves get to explore their own
learning style,
and their own style.
Absolutely. And that's so powerful. I was thinking, I was actually on a training day this Saturday, a Zoom training day for my work, and the first half of it was a lecture. And I sat there thinking, I find it really hard to take in things from a lecture. I just doesn't go in somehow. I don't know why. And then I thought, you know, I've always been like this. At school, I was just like this. I basically just tuned out all the time there's a lecture. And actually what I did with this lecture on the Zoom lecture on Saturday was I actually got my crochet out and started crocheting, because I found that if I'm doing something like that with my hands, I'm more able to focus on what's being said to me. I still would prefer to read it, actually, or to have it in little bite-sized chunks, or to be able to research it for myself. I don't really like somebody standing up in front of me and talking at me for a couple of hours. And then I remembered that when I was at school doing my GCSEs, I used to make friendship bracelets under the desk all the time. And it wasn't what I was meant to be doing. If I got caught, I would be told to put it away. But I would just hold it under the desk and all the time. And I made these really, really elaborate friendship bracelets. And I thought, wow, I did actually know, even back then, that I couldn't focus on what was being told to me. And still now it happens. I was in this lecture, couldn't really process most of it. And afterwards somebody said, oh, but she said to do this. And I was like, really? Did she? And it had just gone totally over my head. And I thought, how on earth did I get through school? I have no idea, because literally people talk to me like that, which is what they do at school, doesn't go in. I don't know what they've said. But obviously I was able to find, luckily for me, I was able to find other ways of learning, which worked okay for me to get me through the exams and through the school system. But I just think we totally don't acknowledge how diverse children are and how diverse their learning styles are. And we don't encourage them to learn how they learn. We tell them, I felt a failure as a child that I couldn't sit in a lecture and remember what was being said and then come out of it at the end and know what had been said. But actually, I didn't need to. And if someone had said, you know what, maybe if you don't go to those lectures and just research it for yourself, you might learn better, that would have been revelatory to me. But I felt I had to go because I felt it was a failing in me rather than a problem with the intersection between my learning style and the way I was being taught. I think it's about not losing touch with your internal drive. And I suppose it's not just about intrinsic motivation as to what you actually are interested in learning, but it's also about how you want to be or how you want to behave at a particular point in time. So my daughter never sits still. She prefers to be upside down, rolling on a exercise ball, bouncing, and that's just what she'll do. And through the day, I have the trampoline in my room with me here, which means that when I'm talking, she can't come in and bounce, but she prefers it being here. So whenever I stop, she comes in, has a bit of a bounce, and then goes out again. And she just does that completely naturally. She basically regulates herself in that way. She just needs some bouncing. Come in, do some bouncing, off you go, do something else. Then she lies upside down on the sofa for a bit. Then she does some handstands. She knows, she follows her body. She knows what her body needs to do. And I think by sort of putting children in it's not a straitjacket, but it kind of is. You have to sit here, you have to sit up straight, you have to be in this place. We prevent them from being able to listen to their bodies. And listen to, I want to go and get some exercise now, or go outside now.
Yeah, I think we forget that when we are at home, we provide them with things like, you've got the trampoline, we've got an indoor swing, we've got an outdoor trampoline. We've got various things around the house that I'm probably forgetting that are even there. Yes. That our children use whenever they need to or want to. And that is part of the self-directed education. That's part of
definitely
them learning about themselves.
Yes, exactly. And I wish I knew when I need to have a bit of a bounce on the trampoline. I feel like this was all squashed out of me too early on. And I think it's amazing that they can do that.
Yeah. So, is there anything else you'd like to tell us about your book specifically?
So my book is in two parts. The first part is more about theory. So that talks about learning, motivation, and it talks quite a bit about the psychological theory of learning and motivation and why I think those theories mesh beautifully with self-directed learning and education. Then it also talks a bit about the research on self-directed education and the studies that have shown, because that it does work really. There are lots of studies now which have shown that it can work. So it shows that children and young people can be entirely unschooled for the entirety of their growing up And when I say unschooled like that, I mean schooled as in having a forced curriculum, basically having an imposed curriculum. And then they can come out, they can graduate from that, or if you want to put it like that, and they can go on, do exams if they want to do exams, go to university if they want to go to university. Their lack of formal schooling from age 5 does not handicap them. It doesn't prevent them from doing the things that other young people do at those ages. And it may in fact give them an advantage because they're not jaded by the system by the time that they get there. And that's certainly what I see in my children. They're not jaded with learning. In fact, it's all interesting. Everything's interesting. And why wouldn't it be? Because if they don't, I think, in fact, I haven't even really defined how I think of self-directed education, but the two things I think are most important are that the learner or the child who's in charge of deciding what they do, and so it's what they learn about, but really it's what they do, because I don't divide doing and learning into different things, and they decide when they start and they decide when they stop. So nobody else says, right, it's time to do this now. They are the person, but within that they could be doing everything. They could be studying a really boring, in quotes, textbook if that's what they want to do. You know, it doesn't mean that it has to all be, there's no particular way of learning that it has to be, in my opinion, with self-directed education, because the important bit is who is deciding to do it and can they stop if they want to. And if you've got those two things in place, then I think, you know, you could have a whole class, you could have a class of children, and one of those children could be a self-directed learner and the rest of them could all be being schooled, and you wouldn't be able to tell the difference from the outside. So I bet that happens in colleges actually, when some unschooled children go to colleges, everybody else is having to do maths GCSE because they've been told you've got to do maths GCSE. Perhaps they've already failed maths GCSE and here they are back to do it again. And then you've got your unschooled child who wants to do maths GCSE. So that unschooled child is a self-directed learner, even if they're in that classroom being taught, because they know they can stop, they know they're doing it because they're interested. And that's why I think most adults are self-directed learners. I think there's something really odd about the way that we think that between 5 and 16, children have to be made to do things. But once we get beyond that, generally we know that it doesn't really work very well when you force people to do things. When you force people to do things, you get all sorts of problems. They resist, they don't want to do it. You destroy their motivation. We know this for adults. I know this for myself, but somehow we forget it for the 5 to 16 age group. I don't know why. Well, maybe this is because conventional schools had a different function than actually learning and education. Yeah. Anyway, the second bit of my book, just to finish off, the second bit of my book is practical. It's how to do it. It's deschooling, how to do self-directed education. There's a chapter on diversity, there's a chapter on well-being, and there's a kind of troubleshooting chapter. And there's also a chapter which has people's personal stories, which also has a story by Heidi about Lego, in fact. Yes. So
I really like about your book, because I have had the pleasure of reading it.
Yeah.
Contributing to it.
Yes.
Is that it does all the things that you've just said, is that it brings together this the theories of learning, psychological theory, sort of very evidence-based, why we're doing what we're doing, and you know, the benefits of that and how it links to our natural human development. And then you also managed to bring in your own personal experience and the stories that you tell. In fact, there were at least 2 stories in there which actually made me properly laugh, because they resonated with me so much. And it gives the book this, I know you know what you're talking about, but that personal experience, you've lived it, you have a living experience of it. Yeah. It's not just you know, psychological theory and scientific discussion. And thirdly, as you've mentioned, it does give these practical examples and walk through you know, practical ideas of what that looks like when it's actually implemented into our family, which I think is no mean feat, the interweaving of all those things. And you did it really, really well, and it was a fantastically brilliant read. I have written a full book review on my
thank you.
And I end it by saying that your book sits next to Peter Gray's Free to Learn. Because
that's no higher praise.
I couldn't give it any higher praise than that.
Oh, thank you, Heidi. Well, so, Heidi's been here all the way along, really. You've seen the whole process, because Heidi, we met when our boys were like 7, didn't we? 7 or 8?
I think it was 8.
Yes.
His 8th birthday whilst
8. So the eldest is 8, and now your youngest is 6. Wow, yeah. It's been a long time.
In fact, was she?
She was baby, or I think she was tiny. I think she was tiny. Certainly when you first started coming to our house, she was not walking yet.
Yeah.
And now she's 6. So so 6 years, in fact. That makes that easy to work out. Yeah. Yes. So thank you, Heidi. I really appreciate your support.
Well, thank you for joining me today. It's been a pleasure.
You're welcome.
So Naomi's book, Changing Our Minds, is available from Amazon. Is it available anywhere else?
It's available almost everywhere, actually. Hive.com is about supporting the high street. Apparently you can get it from Waterstones. I think you can get it directly from the publisher, which is Little Brown. So if you Google it, there are lots of different booksellers to get it from. And it's available from the 4th of February. But you could pre-order it before. I don't know when this is going out, actually, but by the 4th of February.
It will be on the 16th of February.
Okay, so it's already out. Great. Okay, so yes.
Yeah, and listeners can join us monthly on the webinar, Exploring Self-Directed Education.
Yes, and that's really great. I think the webinars have been really exciting so far. We've done 2, and I hope we'll do lots of other topics. But part of the webinars is question and answers. So if you want to come, it's live. You can ask us whatever you want to ask. And also, if you want to suggest topics, we can integrate those into our future plan.
Excellent. So they're available via Eventbrite. So you can go look for us there on Eventbrite under Live, Play, Learn.
And we don't record them. That's the thing about the webinars. You have to be there for the live event. And we don't record them because we want to be able to talk freely about our children, and we don't want that to be recorded necessarily forever. And we think there's something about the live event as well, which enables us to have that kind of interaction. So sorry about that, but you'll need to come.
Well, listeners can join me again in my next episode when I am going to be talking about another recent...
Iris Chen.
So Unschooling parent Iris Chen, who has released her book on tiling. So you can join me again then.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. Bye.